Right, so good afternoon, everybody. I am John Matola, the Vice Chair of the Board of Finance and the Chair of the Board of Finance Special Audit Committee or Audit Committee. Today's Thursday, July 11th, 2024, and we're going to have a presentation on a payroll audit conducted by Joseph Setafani of PKF O'Connor Davies. I'm not going to list everyone here, but I see that members of the Audit Subcommittee are here, Lori Charlton, Barry Leclerc, and I see First Selectman Bill Gerber's here too. So we're going to go to item number 2 on the agenda to hear and discuss a presentation of payroll audit by Joe Setafani of PKF O'Connor Davies. Joe, what I'm going to do is turn it over to you to go through your report. That's part of the backup to today's meeting. So if people from the outside citizens are watching this meeting, if they go to the agenda online, they can get a copy of this report. So, Joe, I turn it over to you. Why don't you start?
Okay, so as far as going over, I can go over some high-level things, or do you want me to walk through it?
Why don't you walk through it? You can go through the pages and walk through it, and obviously leave it up to your discretion. But the high-level stuff, spend a little more time on it, and but go through it. And then what I intend to do is once we if the members of the committee are okay. Maybe we'll go through sections and stop. And if members have a question on a section, we'll do it that way. Okay. How's that? So go ahead, Joe. Why don't you take us through the first part of the report?
Okay. So scope of services on page 1 just kind of lists the specific, what the scope was in the engagement letter, what we looked at. We added number 8 after the engagement letter, as far as looking at that tax payments. But so we looked at the policy and procedures, big picture, looked at system rights, user access, who can access what specific parts of the payroll. We looked at some of the reports that were being used, some of the ones that could be used. We tried to look at, as part of this, some efficiencies. So when I was kind of doing some of the interviews, like what maybe, like what types of things might be able to be automated, or if there's a duplication of effort, or if there's just a different way to do something, such as pushing stuff to employees that were being key punched by other people. So those type of things. So I did 10 interviews of various departments, the heaviest being HR and finance, to understand the system. So looked at any written policies and procedures that they had, looked at the IT, got a report from IT as far as user rights and that type of thing. And then that's the basis for the report. There was no testing, so I'm going to call this a review and not an audit, because I didn't do any testing or whatever. It was basically just through conversation, looking at documents, that type of thing.
Okay.
So so on page 2 is kind of the process. Again, those are the departments I talked to. Just talked about what some of the best practices were as a baseline for a lot of the.
Hey, Joe, hang on one second. You have to mute your microphone. I'm hearing chatter in the background. So if you're on this meeting, mute your microphone. Thank you. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay. So the best practices as the baseline. Again, the recommendations are identified if they're internal control or efficiency related, just for perspective. So it could be one or both. That's the next section, starting on page 3, is kind of more general recommendations versus departmental, just kind of looking at the whole payroll process as a whole. So a lot of what's in here is kind of documentation related, and whether it be formal or should be more formal, that type of thing. So first comment deals with using some sort of form. It doesn't have to be paper, but some sort of form that would document a lot of these changes that are really being communicated through email. And although someone may print the emails and attach them or whatever, it's just again, the best practice is that there's some sort of formal documentation and formal approval for anything that changes. But looked at some of the segregation duties that was in the previous report of the internal audit department, and my comments are on them. I saw basically the same type of things. So just want to acknowledge that some of this was already identified. The review of changes made to employee records. Again, there are some reports that can be run to look at what's changed and then someone to verify and approve that. So this munis happened to be the name of their report. The personal action entry proof report is a good report to show what was changed in the employee master file, rates or marital status or whatever it was, and it can be used again for two reasons: one, to document approval, and two, to make sure all the changes happen correctly.
Joe, John, can we jump? John, is it okay if we jump in with questions, or should we get through the whole section first? Maybe just get through the whole section, or how do you want to do this? John?
All right. He's on mute.
I'm sorry, I muted myself. Yes. Lori, Mary, if you have questions as we go along, feel free, and I'll do the same thing. That's how we can handle this. Go ahead, Lori. You had a question?
Yeah, so these two general recommendations, just to summarize them, because I think they go together. So the first one says that not the first one, but the second one, we don't have appropriate segregation of duties. And then we go on to say that this report that can be run, we're not running this report that's available to see what has been changed. So on the one hand, we don't have adequate segregation of duties, and on the other hand, we have no process to review what changes are being made in the system after they've been made. Is that correct?
Correct. We'll say in general, there might be some checks, but there's nothing that's documented. I couldn't see that somebody could tell me they checked it, but the process normally would be run this report and check. So yes, so there's no internal control, which obviously is a huge risk, and then no monitoring, no double checking, which even multiplies the risk.
So basically,
but if we don't have it. Yeah, if the report's not being run, how could anybody be checking it other than the person who made the change? Like, who would know what changes were made in order to be able to review it?
Yeah, somebody could go look in the system, and I think there are certain things that might have been changed if it's a specific thing, maybe longevity or something. And I'm not saying it's 100%, but there might be some things that could have been looked at on the screen. But this report will make it a lot easier. Plus, it verifies this is what's supposed to happen. This is what did happen.
And Joe, if you were doing it, I know you didn't look at controls as part of your audit, but looking at these two, or as part of the financial statement audit, I know you don't do an audit of internal controls, but if you did, what's the severity of this combination of control weaknesses, would you say? And the reason I ask that is as I read this, a lot of these sound like they could be, potentially material weaknesses between access, between lack of segregation of duties, and then no one changing and no one, reviewing what's been changed.
Yes, a lot of my clients, this access that I'm going to say more that the payroll processing has access to rates, that shows up as a material weakness. The budget is a pretty good control, because the size of your budget, no one's going to spend $20 million extra on payroll. That's going to show up. So you do have some compensating controls, but normally the segregation items are material or at least a significant deficiency that needs to be addressed.
Okay, thank you.
Mary, you good on this? We keep going? Okay, go ahead, Joe.
All right, so I think I was on number 4 there. So the no deduction pay weeks, that's just a practice the town has had, and it just has caused some some issues with employees' paychecks, that type of thing, as far as understanding how deductions roll for 457 or those type of things. So a lot of that's just kind of figure out a plan, and either communicate clearly or just kind of not do it that way. I think it developed because there are certain things like union dues that are only twice a month. But if there's a
Joe, is that
if it,
Joe? Does that are we exposed to some liability there if we, for example, an employee has said to the town, we want the maximum contributed to my 457 plan, but we're not doing that because we're apparently not doing it in those months where there's a third pay period. Isn't that an issue for us? Could be.
I think it's more employee relations. Again, you're asking me, it's kind of a legal question. So is it a legal issue? I don't know. It's more of a legal issue if you took something you weren't supposed to versus you didn't take enough.
I get that.
So it's just kind of like just
my question on that is, maybe I misunderstand it. If an employee, for example, says for the year, I want the maximum 457 deductions taken, and maybe you haven't looked at this. Despite how we do our pay periods, is that happening, or could that not be happening because of the way we do our pay periods? Or don't you know?
Well, I think it's a complication, so I don't know if the employee, if the town says we just do it twice a month and the person doesn't calculate it correctly, if they're doing it over 52 pay periods, but then those months that you don't take it on the actual pay date, then they're going to come out short. So a lot of it is communication. So if the town's going to only do it when the 2 payrolls out of the month, then the employees need to know that so that they have the right amount deducted in those 2 payrolls. But I would do the same thing. 52 pays, divide by 52. This is what you take out, and then for new employees, they're not going to find out till later. And certainly, the employee probably has some responsibility to check their own paycheck. But I think it just needs to be communicated, or just do it the kind of normal way. Every paycheck there's a deduction.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Joe, do we end up, I don't know if you know this, but do we end up making corrections as a result of this to employee? I mean, you said it's an employee relation issue. So do we have employees complaining and we're ending up making manual corrections as a result of this?
Yes, that was what was communicated during some of the discussion, that sometimes, it is creating extra work, we'll say.
Okay.
All right. The next comment 5 is just an efficiency comment, and obviously there's issues as far as unions, but just to go into 26 pays. I mean, most towns, and definitely most towns that are your size, don't do weekly payroll anymore. So again, if you only did payroll every 2 weeks, that's going to create some efficiency as far as that. So that's something for consideration. The elimination of manual timesheet time cards. I know you're already looking at that, going down that road, but just electronic time systems, interface with the payroll system just saves a whole lot of key punching, reduced errors, and it creates other things, chasing people to approve it, but it will increase efficiency to eliminate the paper. Number 7 is just to clearly define the roles between the 2 departments, because just, based upon some of the discussions, there seemed to be some confusion. That's why I kind of go back to that internal control and segregation up front as a driver for however it gets defined, and who does what and what department they report to, that all just be clarified so that things flow a little bit smoother. Number 8 was, again, for perspective, just kind of what needs to be done by when, based upon the town's current process. So information flow, just these are kind of the deadlines to avoid things getting missed or errors or that type of thing. The overtime here I think it was only for Parks and Rec and Library employees are not lining up with the Friday requirements. So there's some some estimating as far as a plan, or else that information is not getting to payroll till Monday. So they do have actual information, but it's not, the information is not getting there by the Friday noontime, which is supposed to be the policy. So they just need to be shifted. Do they get to get paid their overtime the following week? So through Thursday and then after that. So it's looking at shifting their weeks to be, so it lines up with the processing and there's not estimating what overtime was. Everyone just gets paid actual through Thursday, and then Friday starts the next week. So not all departments, I learned, are running, say, Friday to Thursday as far as the pay thing. So that would be another thing that would create some efficiency, is if everybody's pay week ran the same days.
Well, Joe, do you have a sense of to what extent we make adjustments to the payroll as a result of this this issue? This estimating, so we're asking people to approve estimated hours and we're paying on that before the hours have been worked.
Yeah, I didn't think it happened a lot, because I think that what was happening more is delaying the information until Monday when they had it. So I'm not sure if there was a lot of errors. It was more delaying the process and not providing it to payroll till Monday when they knew what Saturday overtime was. So I think that was more what was happening than errors, but I don't have a sense. We'd have to ask, how many times they estimate incorrectly.
Okay.
All right, item 9 was just some of the types of errors that came out in discussion, just for perspective. Just incorrect calculations of certain rates, the timing of longevity, when that becomes effective, over contributions to deferred comp, under contributions. Again, the sick and vacation time being exceeded, which I think, that holds up the payroll process if somebody's negative and they're trying to charge vacation time. Deductions exceeding paychecks. So, a lot of things happen, things change, and then again, without having that form, some of this wasn't apparent. Again, and changes when full-time to part-time, again, maybe that changes some of the deductions and some issues. And then proration of salary, someone starts in the middle of the year. So just having some controls that some of these items are on a checklist or something to identify, check them before the process, because then in a lot of these cases, there are payrolls that are run, extra payrolls, to address some of these errors. And again, I don't know what the volume is, but that was part of the discussions that I had.
Can you give us an example, Joe? Can you give us an example of a situation that would cause deductions to exceed the amount of a paycheck? Is that because we've had to make such a correction to someone's pay that were they overpaid and now deductions exceed the amount of their next paycheck? How would that happen?
I don't know if it's going from full-time to part-time, or they exceeded their vacation, so whatever, if their medical insurance is higher than what they were getting, so something like that. So it's more of an anomaly, I think, of something changed in their regular pay. Now that they're taking unpaid leave, which I think that was one example. Someone started, but they went on their honeymoon, didn't have any time, but then their paychecks trying to get processed and pull their medical out, but they have no money to pay the medical because they were unpaid, or enough of it was unpaid. I think that was one example. So I think it's when something changes, looking at the deductions need to be looked at also.
Okay. Yeah, just this bullet point list, what sort of strikes you is that these are, separate processes feed each one of these things. So this is a lot of different things that have to be fixed, right? I mean, incorrect overtime and other pay rate calculations, timing of longevity, over contributions to deferred comp plan, all of these things are, I'm just jumping ahead in my mind to what has to be done to clean this up and these all look like separate work streams feeding each of these things. So it sounds like a lot.
Yeah, I think later on there are some recommendations that may address parts of this, and there's some additional checks, especially for new employees, to look at avoiding some of these. But
Okay.
all right, and then munis training, I think that's on your agenda. If how are you going to use that? So just it was kind of echoing that for not only for newer employees, but for the employees that are not entering their time and then having somebody else key punch for them. So again, to streamline that type of thing. And then there are some munis functions that will address like longevity. I guess there's a flag that can be used just to see if that can help the process.
So Joe, this
Ours
thing
favorite.
about employees entering their own time, is that salaried employees? Is that hourly? What is that for? Is that just if I'm a salaried employee, I have to enter my time, like did I take vacation or did I work a 40-hour week? What is that? Or is that for, does that also apply to seasonal and hourly employees?
It's definitely anyone with a manual timesheet. Again, Public Works enters. I'm not sure if Parks and Rec does. I know the registrar of voters don't enter. They just send timesheets to the payroll department and they key punch. So there are a few groups, I think it's mentioned somewhere, that that are not entering their own time. So, and I think part-time employees is definitely one of the groups, but I know registrars, I remember that, are not entering their own time. And then I know there's some logistics with employees who also do meetings. All that information is getting entered, by the payroll department based upon emails. Just not a timesheet, not something else. So just a different way to manage that, or if there's a way to do that. And I think there's some logistics on that, and I can't remember
So in
exactly
other
what
words,
it is.
some employees enter their time. Some other employees, maybe a department admin or someone enters their time, and then in other cases, timesheets are sent to payroll who enters the time.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, and then item 11 is just once all this stuff gets addressed, just to have a clear manual so everybody understands what's supposed to happen and is a guide for training new employees. So everything kind of pulled together in a manual. The user rights, I did look at that again. That's where a lot of the lack of segregation is. But not that people are doing it, but they have access. So when I look at internal control, it's not just did the person change the rate, it's just that they have access to change the rate, and that's the risk. So the rights should be reviewed. And this is, again, I only focused on payroll and I didn't look at everyone. I looked at all the critical users. So I think a lot of the rights should be reviewed for this and probably some of the other functions, again, to just reduce it down to what employees need to do their jobs versus having. And it's very common when these get set up that the rights are kind of open until they figure it out. But at some point you have to reduce them down once you figure out what someone needs access to. Then the other rights should be removed.
So Joe, just to clarify so the second bullet, most of the finance department employees have payroll super user rights with no restrictions. So let's just clarify what that means. So they can add an employee. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have to look at specific, but they could change rates. Yeah, they could.
They can add
pretty
an
much everything.
employee unilaterally. They can change rates. Can they change someone's banking information?
I
Their
have to go
direct
back
deposit.
and look, but when I asked, the question is pretty much they could do whatever they want in the payroll module, not necessarily the HR module, but that this was the payroll piece I was focused on. So ideally, the first item, for position control, that only HR should be able to add an employee. But I'd have to double check if finance could add, because I was again focused more on the payroll module. But having super user rights, there's not a good reason, definitely for anyone involved in payroll, to have those rights. But Munis is pretty detailed, and but I assume, again, I just don't understand the detailed mechanics. There's some things that aren't checked off that people can't do, but then does the super user rights override that? I don't know the exact answer to that. That would have to be, I'd have to get more information, like what right comes first.
Hey, Joe, do you know off the top of your head, and maybe this is, if you don't, that's fine. Does Munis have the capability for the town to fix these issues as set forth in number 12 on 8? Does it have that capability to correct those issues that you've identified? I assume it does,
You just
right?
gotta,
Yeah.
yeah,
Just
you
gotta
just
do it.
gotta uncheck the box and take the rights away.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
it's not,
I guess that's it. But I think what you have to be is probably not that easy, because I think you don't want to, before you do something like that, you have to really fully understand the process. You wouldn't want to just uncheck rights without understanding what the impact would be. Because you could, the risk is that you kind of just shut everything down, especially if
yeah.
somebody's out 1 week or whatever. So this to me, in my experience, is much more complicated of a fix than it would appear to be, because if we don't have a manual, if we don't have a process outline, and we don't understand who exactly is supposed to do what and which duties are supposed to be segregated and all of that, like that the rights should be aligned with that. And, and then once you change them, you have to, go through a testing period typically to make sure it doesn't prevent somebody from doing their job as needed. So this is a dangerous thing. This is just, to me, completely unacceptable to have super user rights just granted across the board. But, fixing it while necessary is not, I don't think it's just checking a box. It's, there's a lot of threads between all these recommendations, as I see it. But
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It's the program allows you to do it, but there has to be training and understanding of who's supposed to be doing what and so on and so forth. So I understand, Lori, what you're saying 100%. So, all right. Anything? Go ahead, Joe.
All right, so that's the end of that, the general section. So the next section was the actual payroll processing. Financial assistant is the title. And the timesheets are not prepared for board meetings. Again, it's just done via email. So some of the themes are similar. This is specific to kind of the documentation of either time or changes that I mentioned up front. Account distributions may need to be changed. Currently, the change is done by the the payroll clerk. I'm just going to use payroll clerk so we know who we're talking about versus the actual title. Again, that's a way to kind of push payroll all around, so that person really shouldn't have access to where payroll is getting charged. That somebody else should
right.
have that access.
I mean, shouldn't that be just driven by the employee, where the employee sits? I mean, if an employee's in my department, then their pay should get charged to my department, right? Somebody shouldn't be able to move that pay to another department, right?
Yeah, I think where it's come up, if there's something, it was a project or ECC or some specific where overtime or something went somewhere. So it's not something that's probably happening a lot, but it would be a risk if someone could just decide to
Right.
do that without
Yeah,
a
especially if
control.
you're relying on budgetary control as a, kind of your overriding control here. Budgetary control depends on the right account distribution for your expenses. And so usually that's, attached to an employee. I mean, unless there's an individual project where somebody is splitting their time between multiple departments, but nonetheless, it doesn't seem like that should be a function that's sitting in the payroll department.
Yep. Okay, so item 3, again, email requests, just again, formalizing any of those changes that need to be made. I think that personal action form, again, or some form, and then documentation or approval versus the emails. Because most of those approvals are by exception, so the department head may be included, but most of the time there's not confirmation. Yes, I approve. It's just I was on the email. If I don't say anything, it must be okay. So, which normally for approvals, at least from the audit side, we want direct confirmation that it was approved versus the absence of saying it's a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, departments, enter time used, total hours are, so some cases are not entering the time by day. It was mentioned that some you just may put in whatever the number is, 37.5 hours, and not enter each day. So I assume that's when they're not taking sick or vacation, but just DOL, everybody else wants who's here, what day, how much did you work? So it really should be entered daily. So here's the board of registrars I mentioned earlier. The timesheets are being entered by payroll versus them entering it directly themselves. Although you have a low number of checks, just again, understanding that there's issues with unions and that type of thing, but everybody really should be direct deposit, and no checks issued. Then it just takes away some of the recommendations of people picking up checks and that process if everything's direct deposit. So the 457 compensation plan, it seems to be causing some issues as far as the timing and when that needs to get done. So the recommendation is just kind of reevaluate that earlier date, why it's earlier. Does it need to be earlier and line it up more with the rest of the payroll dates? 8 ECC just has, because of their schedules, it seems like every week or every certain period they got to adjust people's time because the munis is defaulted to a certain number, and everyone's schedule seems to rotate, so it has to be adjusted each time, and that's being done by payroll versus ECC. They send the spreadsheet. Again, just kind of push it back to the department and enter the actual time. 9, just none of the timesheets or time cards really come to finance, so just potentially that would be an area for internal audit to look at to make sure that what's being entered or what they're sending is supported by the time cards. All right. Next one, accounting coordinator or payroll supervisor. So again, the email addressing any issues that need to be corrected is being done through email versus a form where there's clear approval. So payroll tax returns, just, there should be a preparer and a reviewer, just kind of like normal, just for multiple reasons, even just accuracy to avoid errors. So that's that one. No formal review. All right. That's kind of what that I just kind of mentioned, that should be reviewed along the way. Okay. All right. HR department. Again, more just looking at your current workflow. Again, this is an observation at a point in time. Just HR assistant directors doing a lot of the work, but normally they would be the control to check. But the way things are flowing right now, there's a lot of direct work being done, and which means there should be a review and approval of the work that's being done. Again, just someone does something, someone should be checking it.
Yeah, just I don't know. I'll make a comment there too. I think that's your point is well taken that somebody else should be doing it. But I guess the other comment I would make is that our HR assistant director is also the town risk manager, has a lot of other important functions in the town. Seems a little bit insane to me that we have the need to devote that individual to this type of activity. It's just not a good use of our resources, especially, given the number of initiatives that the HR department has on their plate. So, review segregation of duties, yes, but a lot of these things that you're talking about with respect to efficiencies are, I think, point to a bigger problem in terms of how we're being forced to use the town's resources here. Doesn't seem like a good use of them. Just a comment.
Again, more certain employee payments are being sent again via email if it's coming from HR. Again, there should be more formal documentation for any changes that are going on in payroll to the employees' paychecks. The longevity we mentioned, I think there was issues that the flag didn't seem to be working. Now it's being managed on a spreadsheet, but it did. Again, based upon talking to people, it did previously or appeared to previously work. So just to kind of go back and see what be done there, so it's not managed in a spreadsheet, and let the software do the work. Again, this payroll change report has the ability to generate reports that would show what was changed, so that can be verified and approved. So in discussions, it didn't seem that there was a formal process to communicate to other town departments and especially IT when employees were terminated, so that all the rights can be shut down, email, everything else. So that should be in place. I know that's internally. I get emails when someone's terminated that everyone knows what the date is and everything gets shut off. Just again, the risk of unauthorized access. Benefit related, so related to the town software is the benefits manager only has read-only access. All the requested changes are made by the HR resource assistant. It seems that the benefit manager, I think, should be, again, to hopefully create some efficiency or some capacity to be able to do other things, would have access to that. And again, the change report should be run and verified, but just seems it creates a bottleneck with everything going to that one person, where the benefits person could manage the benefits piece. Again, everything's done using paper forms. To see if Munis or some other employee self-serve could manage the benefit plan better than the paper. Again, similar thing to the vendor system, because internally you got to put it into the payroll system, but then other things have to be updated in the vendor system, the 457 or Anthem. Is there a way to automate some of that versus, again, logging in and doing all those changes one by one manually? There was on a periodic basis, again, we're looking at deduction codes and making sure they match what's coming out of a person's paycheck. I think that should be a formal policy to be done. I think looking at the employee's first paycheck and matching that to all their benefit selections and 401k and everything else, and making sure that's right at the beginning to avoid issues later. The loans for the 457
can I just ask a question about that? And I don't know, maybe Bill Gerber knows this since he's a relatively new employee of the town. When you make what I'm used to is, I guess you would make your annual benefit selections and then you'd get a confirmation back saying this is what, went into the system. Do you agree with all of this? So does that happen I understand Joe's recommendation that yes, the benefits manager should check that deductions and elections, I guess, are correct for new employees. But is there any other process to confirm with new employees that what they picked is reflected correctly in their paycheck or not?
Well, I don't recall seeing anything, but Peter Ritchie's, let's see, Megan's not on the line. I don't know if I see Peter's name up here. I can't recall seeing anything. I just filled in my forms and handed them in. I don't think I got a confirmation, but maybe Peter can answer, or Kathleen. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just, because what Joe is saying makes sense. I'm just wondering what that looks like during periods of time when we have a lot of new employees. But anyway, it's not urgent. I'm just curious. I'm surprised that wouldn't be something that we would.
Yeah, because
would be happening.
Currently you're filling in forms, making your selections and submitting the forms. At least that's how I was onboarded. And if in other places, if I had done it online, I would have gotten an email back confirming. So, yeah.
Got it. Okay. Sorry, Joe. Go ahead.
Yep, that's fine. Item 5, there's no review of medical claims being paid by the town's provider to verify they're only for town employees. So again, this is a process that should happen best case monthly, at least quarterly, but just to make sure. And I've seen it happen once when I did some outsourced internal auditing for a client that it wasn't a town employee. And I guess the example I use, there's a town of Fairfield, New Jersey, and Anthem's supposed to have good controls, but should not trust them to get everything right 100%. Somebody should make sure. Hopefully, it's, again, something that could be automated if you're looking at two databases. But I think maybe you talked about looking at getting a claims auditor to kind of even look at a much lower level at some of the procedures or whatever makes sense. But just somehow there should be some checking to make sure the town of Fairfield's only paying for town of Fairfield employees.
Yeah, paying for employees and also paying for procedures that are, covered by the plan, right? That's what claims audits look at as well.
Right, which is probably a bigger number than the other number. For the 457 loans, the town is kind of managing that process. I know there's been discussions of just getting out of the middle and let the loans be paid directly back to the 457 vendor. So again, that would just create some efficiency and get the town out of the middle of that. So if that's something that could be put in place sooner than later, it'll just avoid administrative effort by the town. All right, police departments. So they have that separate system, that POSS system. So most of the regular time is uploaded into the payroll system out of that system. It's just the part-time employees and then the outside services, overtime, that type of thing is done by manual timesheet. So the basic big part is all automated, seems to work very well. The timesheet, the manual timesheet is still a paper timesheet. So again, looking at overtime, shift differential pay rates, college pay, police department does not have access to view so the overtime rate in Munis. So I guess just going back to some of those errors that may have happened, and this comment came out in police and fire that they thought if they could at least have read only, they could see, again, just their department, but they could see the rates, then that might avoid some of the payrolls being rerun because something was wrong with a calculation. And again, same with the PTO balances. Again, I think both police and fire had the same thing, and those balances are not, police department is tracking it in their system, fire department's tracking it in their system, but and Munis has a different number, or it's not reconciled, or hasn't been reconciled in recent time. I guess at some points it was a reconciliation process, but that hasn't happened. So again, a lot of it's happening at injury leave or retirement, but that's something that should at least be done at year end to make sure, if not before, that the databases are the same. And again, so it's allowing them to have the read-only access because both payroll clerks and police and fire were willing to spend the time and kind of look at this and make sure it's reconciled on a timely basis. And again, promotions, again,
Joe,
just another payroll.
Is there, Joe, can you just clarify, is there a reason that, I mean, they want the access, they're willing to do the work to reconcile it? Did you understand or find out during the course of your interviews why that access has not been provided?
I think part of it was, I guess, figuring out access that would not give them access, not that, and I don't know what's in the other system, but social security numbers and other types of things. So I don't know how granular that the restrictions can be, that if they're seeing the whole master file, that information's on there, but so if that's an issue, and is that okay because they process payroll, maybe they already have that information in all their files, but that was something that came up when I was asking. It was like, well, then they have access to other information that maybe they shouldn't, but if they're part of the payroll process, then that would be a decision the town would have to make, that it's okay that they have that access, or they could see that information.
Yeah, it seems odd that you couldn't set up just restricted read-only access to the appropriate fields, but okay.
Right. Okay, and fire, again, again, documentation of differential rates for time, again, the same theme of things are being communicated through email and not documented. Some of the calculations, again, overtime shift differential, same as we just went over for police. Number 3, same for the PTO balances. And again, because fire has their own system, and that upload seems to be working well. And then item 4, again, the communication via email versus some sort of formal approval. All right, and then that last section, the tax penalty. So this is more statements of this was due to a clerical error. There was a second payment that was not related to a tax penalty. It was the IRS basically requesting the town to send the vendor payment to the IRS because the vendor was delinquent with the IRS, and then that the payment was recorded in the revenue account. So the recommendation again was that somebody be reviewing it, so it just avoids, NPS number 3, that someone prepares it, someone reviews it, with the backup to hopefully avoid clerical errors in the future.
Okay. I just want to point out the last bullet, the fact that the payment for the penalty was recorded as an offset to a revenue account is really inappropriate. That is not okay. looks like, I don't know if, I'm not going to make any assumptions about if someone was trying to conceal it or whatever, but expenses don't get offset against revenue accounts. In fact, I think that might even be a charter violation. We don't do that. So there should be some training and education around that.
So, Joe, thank you for your presentation. I don't know if members have any other questions on this, and I'll open the door to that. And if not, I wanted to ask the first selectman a question.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, if you want to ask me a question, go ahead. I just wanted to thank Joe. I thought this was a well done report.
Yeah, it's a great report. And Bill, the question I wanted to ask you is, so yeah, I know I think this report came out, final version, on Monday. What's the game plan on the town side, Bill? This could be an unfair question to you, but what's your thought process on how to go about implementing these recommendations, and how long? And again, maybe Joe can chime in, and maybe you, Lori, too, and Mary, involved in this more. How long does it take to implement some of these recommendations? Are we talking, 3 months, 6 months, a year?
Well,
I don't know the answer. So go ahead, Bill.
Well, it's probably fair to say that we are hopefully soon going to be making some big changes in the way we do payroll. And what I'm hoping is that, we've talked to a lot of vendors to actually outsource payroll, including time and attendance. And we have, through a process of interviews, decided that Paycom is the strongest for us. And we've actually started a process that will hopefully soon lead to having Paycom pick up, pick up our payroll. They're fully. That doesn't mean that these issues all go away. Some of them will go away, hopefully. But we should be looking at the implementation of our outsourcing of correcting these issues in the context of doing so as part of the implementation of bringing Paycom in, which I think they have to be addressed as we work with Paycom. Paycom's expecting, if we move forward with them, and that would have to be approved by the Board of Selectmen, the contract, which is not, we don't have a contract yet to approve, but hopefully soon that will happen, and I think they think it will take 8 to 12 weeks to implement, but we can't feel comfortable implementing it, saying that we've implemented it, unless all of these issues are addressed. That doesn't answer your question on timing, but hopefully the answer is within 3 months.
So, Bill, is it fair to say that we had this payroll audit done, but the administration was seeing some issues with payroll since you took office?
Well, I've talked about that extensively.
Yeah.
That's no secret, and I think it's been going on for a very long time, and there have been issues, over several administrations, I think I don't want to be what's the word, too cavalier about it. I know that there will be implementation. There will be a process to get this right. We're not naive. We know that sometimes outside firms offer the world, and it's never as easy as they say it is. But this was, I mean, there are really, while there are some things that we learned I learned a lot from this report. I mean, I think I had heard a lot of this, not written down, but a lot of this I'd heard. What's in this report I'd heard from talking to people over the past few months.
Lori?
Can I ask a related question? So, and thank you. I want to reiterate the thanks to Mr. Centofanti for the report, and to the first selectman for supporting this project, because obviously we all had concerns about the process. But if the town ultimately decided not to pursue another technology solution like Paycom, or the Board of Selectmen doesn't approve it, for example, and we have to literally go through and just, with our existing system, Munis, and implement all the recommendations in this report, it maybe I'm interpreting, but it just strikes me that this would require some additional resources to get this right. Would you? I mean, particularly, we have what I heard through some of this is that there's a lot of things we can do to utilize our systems better, and maybe that would create some efficiencies. But we also have people in HR, including very senior level people, doing a lot of manual tasks and manual work. And I don't know. I'm just there's going to be a cost to fixing. There would be if we didn't go the route of a different technology solution. There would be cost involved, it sounds like, in addressing all of these recommendations. That was my first thought. My second thought is, after having been through the DPW audit and that whole process, which it took us, the better part of 4 years to finally address all those recommendations. And frankly, I'm not sure whether all those fixes actually even stuck. We haven't had a re-audit. I'm just, when I see the volume of recommendations like this and the number of processes and the number of work streams involved in fixing this, sounds like a lot. So, so back to my original question: is what would it cost? Would there be more cost involved in fixing this? Do we have the resources to actually implement these recommendations if we had to?
I would say no way do we have the resources to implement this. So we would have to build, a payroll department. And yeah, there are, I did call around other municipalities and find out what they do, and a lot outsource and a lot don't. And so, if you call over to Bridgeport, they'll say, they can do it, or, or New Haven, yeah, they can do it, but they have a payroll department. And, we've had payroll people here over multiple administrations. I don't think building a really, very high functioning payroll department is, it won't be cheap, and it won't be easy, because we certainly haven't really done it successfully here over multiple administrations, in my opinion. And, we've lost people, we lose people. The turnover has been incredibly high. Not just in, we've had turnover in this administration, but in the last administration, we had significant turnover with people coming in and doing this job and not doing it well. So I don't think it's so easy to do it internally. So
right.
I think this is not a job, from what I can tell, that you just go out and hire some smart person and train them. Like, you need people to start with, people that really know what they're doing, and maybe build a function. So I think doing it internally would ultimately, from what I can tell, be more expensive than the solution that we're looking at. If we had a highly functioning payroll department right now, then we might be looking at a different, cost benefit analysis. But right now, I think the benefit of outsourcing outweighs the cost of or the outweighs the cost of the payroll, because the cost of building something in-house, I think, would ultimately be higher.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I guess, yeah, and I'm sure we have some, dedicated and talented employees who work on payroll. But when I look at these recommendations, we're talking about segregation of duties. We're talking about systems changes, access rights. I mean, you're talking about a wholesale change in all of the processes and functions. And you don't create segregation of duties, typically without, having, you have to take rights, you have to take responsibilities away from somebody and give them to somebody else in order to do that. So there's a lot of change there. So anyway, thank you for that perspective. And I guess my other question is just in looking at the cost benefit analysis, I'm just wondering, do you have any idea of how much time or an estimate of how much time we spend processing payroll, including, department heads and HR? I mean, I know we have we have a couple of people in finance devoted to that role. And we've had off and on a person in HR, but, in terms of management time, department head time, people signing off on time and attendance, it seems like it's just a very costly administrative process overall. Would you agree with that, or?
I agree with that, because I only see a very, very small sliver of the insanity of, for at least for time and attendance. I see, someone in my office who's doing it for some of the part-time people in my office, and it's like a ridiculous process where you have to keep track of, people have to keep track of their own hours, but then the supervisor needs to somehow keep track of the hours, and it's all written, it's written down, then entered into a system. I just, so on the time and attendance piece of it, it's, I think that ultimately, had to be implemented, a new time and attendance system. We're in the Stone Age here. We have a director at the transfer station who spends probably half his time on time and attendance. John Cattell is spending 15 hours a week probably on time and attendance of his people. They're coming in, they're going, so and they're using punch cards, and they're it's just it's an awful burden for him, and he's one of the the biggest he's one of the most emphatic proponents of making this change. I think you have to delineate between time and attendance and outsourcing the payroll function. They're different. You don't have to do them both. But Paycom's got a built-in time and attendance system, so it will be both at the same time.
Thank you.
Mary, I saw your hand up earlier. Do you have questions? You're muted, I think, Mary. Still can't hear you yet.
No.
Not yet.
We
Still
can't hear you, Mary.
Sorry.
So while Mary's unmuting, one other thing, so just this past week, there were a few part-time employees who, gave incorrect bank accounts, and the whole payroll was processed, and 3 bank accounts were incorrect, and it got bounced back, and the whole thing had to be done over again. We don't have really a very, there's not like a very good self-service component. Paycom will have has a robust self-service app, so that hopefully we're going to avoid all of these mistakes, and there are many that kind of foul up the whole process and cause you to redo the whole thing again with the bank.
Okay.
Mary, you there? Nope.
No.
Mary, if all else fails, you could try to type your question in. We did hear you before, though.
We did hear you for a second, it sounded like.
Maybe can I just ask Joe a question in the meantime? But Joe, in your experience, and I don't know if you've done like deep dives of payroll processes for other towns, but does this strike you as normal? Or is this unusually messy? Because this is, to me, it seems extremely messy. Payroll is typically a non-event. In most organizations, you don't hear about it unless it goes wrong, but usually it doesn't go wrong very often. It seems like we have many, many challenges on an ongoing basis. And I'm just wondering if you have a perspective based on your work with other clients.
Yeah, unless there's something big or somebody asks or affects the audit, other than some of the control aspects, I'm not really that involved with
Okay.
that.
That's fair.
And I'm probably less involved now at my level because my staff is out doing all that work. So if someone has a problem, I know about it, but again, it doesn't really come up that often.
Yeah, one thing I would also be curious about, and maybe this would be a question for Courtney, Laborious, or even Connie, but I don't know, since I've been on this board, I've heard about various challenges with this process. And when I say payroll, I don't mean the finance department per se. I just mean the whole process of getting payroll out the door. I recall very clearly a former HR director saying that getting the payroll out was his biggest challenge, which I found shocking. I never have heard anything about this one way or another on the Board of Ed side, and presumably they have the same systems that we do. So it just makes me wonder whether they're having the same challenges and we don't hear about them, or we have something to learn from them in terms of how they're doing it. Or if they, if we do make a change to get a different, outsourced technology solution, if the Board of Ed could also benefit from it, frankly. I just think that ought to be looked at.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't talked to Courtney. Somebody on this call probably has. I don't know if it's Peter or David, but somebody, I forget who it was, did talk to Courtney. Maybe it was Kathleen, and she sounded very interested to see how this goes, because it sounded like they would be more than happy to do something like what we're looking at. So I don't think all is as easy as we might think. They do have a lot of resources and a lot more manpower, so maybe they're just able to work around it. But it didn't sound like all roses, but that's secondhand.
Okay. Yeah, no, I just, I know that, from time to time during budget meetings, people have raised this prospect of having operational audits, of Board of Ed, or I say Board of Ed loosely, central office, Fairfield Public Schools, and, to look for efficiencies. And I just wonder if this is such a problem at the town. They have clearly many more employees than the town has, and they have the same types of issues with seasonal employees and substitutes and hourly, and they have union contracts and all the same things. So, they have all the same challenges. And I hope that as we move forward, we at least, figure out whether we have an opportunity there as well in this area.
Yeah, hopefully it's so compelling that, but, I would say the same for fire and police. They can see how it goes and see if there's any reason that they might want to use it. Because right now they are staying on their own in-house, their management systems.
So they would stay on their own front end time and attendance system.
They would, and I think they are more comfortable with the system. I mean, we have
Yep.
firehouse and then police. I forget the name of it, but they do that separately, and then it gets rolled up into Munis.
Got it.
Any
Thank you.
luck, Mary? Okay. Well,
Mary, can you type a question into the chat?
I think she said that's okay. I'm reading lips.
Okay.
Any lip reader?
So I think
Joe, are you a lip?
I guess the game plan would be at some point in the next 8 to 12 weeks, this audit committee can reconvene and get an update from the administration on what's happening, and we can talk about it again sometime probably in the fall, it looks like. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah, and this is public now, right? So we can, assuming we move forward with Paycom, we should provide this to Paycom and make sure all this is well understood before any work starts.
Yep. Okay. Certainly, Mary, if you have questions, why don't you email us and Bill and Joe, and we'll get answers. Any other questions, concerns by members of the committee?
Thank Brian for his cameo.
That's right. He didn't fix the problem though, so but that's okay. So.
Yeah, just thank you again to the actually to the Board of Selectmen for supporting this project. This just kind of came up as a recommendation from the audit committee, and we really appreciate it. Thank you, Joe, for doing the work. It's important to to look at these things. Ultimately, we want to create efficiencies for the town, for the taxpayers. This is the kind of thing we have to be looking at, so we understand how to get better and how to fix old processes that take up a lot of our town resources. So thank you again.
Okay.
Sorry we put so much pressure on you, Joe. You had to make room in your schedule. That was not easy.
Well, yeah, no, it worked out. It was just other chaos that was going on around that happens after you make some commitments, and then things are out of my control with staff disappearing and those type of things. So, but glad we got it done.
Thank you, everyone. Okay.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
I will. Number 3, entertain a motion to adjourn. Ms. Charlton, seconded by Ms. Leclerc. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Good night.